Hello and welcome to the inaugural edition of Lifting Lowdown, a new podcast brought to you by Lift Hoist International. My name is Guy Harris and I am the publisher of LHI, the market-leading magazine servicing the global industrial lifting sector. Not another podcast, I hear you cry. Well, hopefully this one is a little different and a lot more engaging. This is where I invite people from the industry in joining me to cut through the formality and discuss topics in a relaxed and friendly manner. So, let's get straight into it. I'm delighted to be joined today by Richard Howes and David Ayling. Richard Howes is a director at Bridger Howes, a niche PR consultancy with a client base in the lifting and materials handling sectors. Rich, who previously achieved a lifelong ambition to become a sports journalist, found himself in the lifting business in 2005 on the editorial team of a crane magazine. He went on to edit a number of titles before transitioning to business ownership in 2014. Dave Ayling is the former owner of Straightpoint up until its acquisition by Crosby in January 2019. In 18 years of ownership of Straightpoint, he has developed load monitoring and wireless technology, ensuring lifting and operators are safe. He is now a business consultant for the Crosby Group and also has his own consultancy, Wheatstone Projects, where he offers assistance with the setup of international distribution networks, product innovation and marketing. Welcome to Lifting Lowdown, guys.
Thank you, Guy. Good to be here.
I appreciate you having us.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure, gents. Absolute pleasure. Well, I mean, the format of this podcast is that it's not a straightforward interview. We just get together and have a chat on a subject or maybe a number of subjects. And we thought we would talk about travel and maybe more pointedly trade shows in the wake of COVID-19. That obviously is not going away at the moment, unfortunately. And as we head towards the autumn season, some events are going ahead, but what value will they add in this socially distanced era? So guys, what are your thoughts?
I think I was thinking about when you kind of briefed me about this, Guy, some of the topics you wanted to discuss, and one thing that did come to my mind was, and it's something that I think companies need to be careful of, is that we don't want to be doing shows just because you've got people who've been confined for weeks and are desperate to go out and get out and do anything.
That's for sure.
And you need to make sure that that your rationale for doing a show is correct, and it isn't for the wrong reasons, it's for the right reasons. And I think, myself, I'm used to, as you guys know, although now I've retired a little from the coalface, but my feeling of getting out there is huge, and it must be the same for many people who are used to doing the shows and the travel. And I think we just need to be careful of that and make sure that the reasons are right for getting out there and doing it.
Well, I couldn't echo those sentiments more, really, Dave. I mean, I think we're all getting a bit stir crazy. We're all desperate for a trip to the hairdressers on the 4th of July and just getting out of the house. But I mean, obviously, I look like it, yeah. Well, for the benefit of our listeners, David, Rich, and myself can all see each other. But this is one of the reasons why we thought we'd stick to the podcast format and not do a video, because we're all looking a bit hirsute and not as people would probably expect to see us at it when they come across it at the trade fairs. But yeah, I mean, I'm a little surprised, actually. I don't want to name names, but I did come across an exhibition that still is going ahead in September in the UK. And I'm sitting here thinking, how can that possibly go ahead when we are really not meant to be traveling unless it's essential, more than 5 miles away from our homes? How on earth can we travel to, for example, NEC Birmingham, all with a view to jump in this giant Petri dish and start meeting and greeting again?
It's that time of year, isn't it, where you find yourself having conversations with people, and it's, oh, when we're going to see you at this event in the autumn or the fall, what's your travel schedule look like? And you're always comparing diaries. And I think what's been interesting about the dialogue that I've been having is that people, which is consistent to kind of my friends and family to some extent, is people are very split. And I think that's really problematic from a trade show standpoint, because what a trade show takes is a great deal of consensus and camaraderie to get the thing off the ground and make it happen. So venues, organisers, exhibitors, sponsors, delegates, visitors, their employers, airlines, airports, transport, unions and trade, which is applicable for certain regions, they all need to come together and say, yeah, okay, this is a viable concept to put a trade show on. And I'm just not feeling that there's that consensus or weight in any direction. In any 5 people you speak to at the moment, you've got one person who's very cavalier and like, let's go, let's get back out there, let's open the bars and restaurants, let's get on an aeroplane. And then at the other extreme, you've got someone, I'm really not leaving my house or visiting my relatives yet. Then there's the people in the middle. So without that real gravitational pull towards getting everyone in an exhibition centre and travelling and doing all the hardship, quite frankly, that needs to go into getting a show and making it viable, I'd be so nervous if I was organising at the moment that it was going to be a real damp squib. Indeed, I feel pretty sort of nervous about investing my time and effort into going to a show that might fall flat as well. I don't have any anxiety, not because I'm better or worse than anyone who is very unsure for health reasons. I'm not necessarily suffering that anxiety, but purely from a productivity point of view, just to go back to the point you both made at the outset, we could really end up doing a show for show's sake, and then it just doesn't work. And then what damage is that going to do to that concept moving forward?
So I would agree with that. I mean, but you both have done shows this year, right? I mean, I know, Rich, you were at Modex back in March because LHI was there. I wasn't there personally. And Dave, you did a show, is it in Scotland earlier this year?
Yeah. Did offshore in at the new Aberdeen Centre. Yeah.
That's right. So, I mean, that was when COVID-19 was obviously in China, and I know you travelled there quite recently too, because you wrote about that in LHI magazine, of course.
Yeah.
But I mean, what was the general sentiment? What was the feeling on the show floor for you guys at both of those events?
I think for me that there was a bit of an ominous feeling about what was coming, and I also went to the Cheltenham Festival, which is, in UK media is, that was seen as 250,000 people at an event, all close to each other. And certainly there was a real feeling of, should we be here? I'm really not sure that we should. But I think the other thing that just tackling onto what Rich was saying there, that, there's 2 parts to an exhibition, isn't there? There's the exhibitors and there are the visitors to the exhibition. And as we all know, it's not just about what happens in the hall in the day. There's the dinners in the evening. There's drinks at the bar with people, and that's all part of the whole thing, isn't it? Leah at Liftex, for instance, you see as many people in the evening at a dinner or having a beer or a glass of wine than you do in the day, and I just can't see at the moment. I can't see how that could happen in 2020. I wouldn't be comfortable to, as Rich said, go to the NEC and stay in a hotel and have big group breakfasts and all that stuff. And I wouldn't want to put my time and investment into that at this time. But then what's the alternative? That's a really tricky one.
I think that it just really depends as well on what type of show it is for that specific person, because you can broadly say what an exhibitor's going to try and achieve, what a visitor's going to try and achieve, what a sponsor's trying to do. But really within that, there's so many different agendas. And some events I go to, the show just kind of, just happens in the background. The main reason I'm there is for the networking and what goes on off site or connecting with people over dinners and hospitality, etc. So there's certain events that I just simply wouldn't travel to unless they had that component bolted onto them. There just isn't the value for me in walking around an exhibition and then going back to my hotel and sitting on my laptop, it makes the exercise completely redundant to me. But just going back to your previous question, Guy, it was interesting because it was about, I suppose, late February, early March when we COVID-19 was kind of becoming, it was in the headlines all the time, and it's been in the news ever since then. And that was around the time when I was getting my suitcase out for 2 shows in the States, in the Modex in Atlanta and ConExpo in Las Vegas. They sort of overlapped. I think they both run, in totality from the 7th to the 15th of the month. And I was very cavalier, as was, my business partner, Mark, who you guys both know well. We were both, let's just go and do this. Let's not worry about what's in the news. And not speaking for Mark here, but for me, certainly, I just felt a little bit dumb, actually. Halfway through ConExpo, I kind of felt, Vegas just felt so sleepy and quiet, and people were very anxious, and the footfall was way down at both shows. People didn't know whether to shake hands, whether to elbow bump, fist bump, keep their distance, sanitize their hands in front of the person. And I just really felt perspective. I got perspective all of a sudden, and then when it looked like we wasn't even going to be able to come back from Vegas because of flights, and by mid-March the whole COVID thing had kind of was beginning to spike a little bit. And I'm in no real rush to be in a far-flung country and kind of not and experience that again. It wasn't good personally and professionally, so I kind of changed my tune a little bit, and I'm still mindful of that as we sit here now, potentially looking at getting on a plane and doing this again. So I just think that there's just too much against these autumn shows.
When do you think you're next going to shake someone's hand? But I mean, it's almost a datum, isn't it?
It's a genuine and it's a fair question, Dave.
Yeah, when you feel capable of approaching a stranger and shaking their hand and not feeling the need to go and run off and wash your hands for 20 seconds, that's probably the time that you can go to a trade show.
That's probably a good measuring stick. Are you gonna elbow bump on a deal?
Yeah, that's right. Exchanging business cards.
I was watching one of Ben Fogel's shows this week, actually, one of his new Lives in the Wild things, where he goes out and visits people who are living extreme lives. And it's an easy watch. I'm not necessarily recommending it, but he can be a little bit touchy-feely, Ben Fogel, with his with his guests or the people he visits. But it's really appreciable now, because this was filmed kind of before the COVID era, how much he shakes hands, how much he hugs people, how much he puts his hand on their shoulder when they're talking. And societally now, we've become almost, it's almost, you raise eyebrows when you see that level of contact. So to get from this point to where we're then touching strangers, quite frankly, and offering a hand, as you say, to say, nice to meet you, this is what my company does. It just feels a long way off still.
I mean, I would agree with you. I mean, it's in terms of traveling internationally, we're not really sure where we can go to necessarily, if we can go. But what does that entail? What does that mean? I mean, we've talked, Rich, you and I, about the distancing on planes, for example. I mean, you're not going to get served food probably on a long distance flight. Are you going to have one seat empty, vacant between you? Are you going to have a face mask for 10 hours?
I think you are at the moment.
I've got a couple of face masks here because I'm a regular Uber customer, and I know that their policy is that not that I've got anywhere to go in an Uber right now, but I've got a couple of face masks before they sell out, because their policy is going to be that you need a face mask on to ride. And okay, you'll get used to it. But I put it on indoors for 10 minutes and it was unbearable. It was hot, it was itchy, it was claustrophobic. And to sit on a transatlantic flight with one of those on, just to do a bit of business that I could probably achieve on over email, telephone, or video conference, and then when you throw in all the associated risk that there might be with doing it, it's pretty much a no deal for me. I mean, I just can't see me sitting on a plane in a mask or walking around a trade show. I mean, that's one of your engagement points, isn't
Well,
it?
that's my point.
You meet people, and you to take that.
You would routinely see that in Asia, though, Rich. We've both been at exhibitions in Singapore, for instance, where routinely people will walk around with a mask if they've got a cold or for whatever reason, and that's a little bit of a cultural thing, I think.
I was going to say that's more.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, and I don't necessarily think it would make me more comfortable doing it. Honestly, I certainly don't take any offence and respect all those cultural ways that you see when you're travelling. But to go to a UK or stateside or a big German show, I don't see the demographic embracing that kind of PPE. I really don't. Time will tell. I think the test won't be this year because I think people will write it off.
Yeah.
I think this might come in the spring if those kind of rules are still. We might have to all look at our best practices then. But honestly, I don't see people wearing masks to certain shows in certain industries at the moment.
Well, I mean, obviously, exhibitions. I mean, it's very much a meet and greet, show and tell industry, right? Our industry is very much like that when we go to these exhibitions. So if we can't do that, as you said, David, we don't have the networking opportunities, and like you said, Rich, if we don't have that camaraderie opportunity, then you have to question, I guess, is it worthwhile going?
Absolutely, and I think the other thing I was thinking about was at Straightpoint we had a touchy feely product. Yeah. You've got product on a stand. I mean, how do you deal with that? Some of the Straightpoint products, people will be coming along every few minutes, touching it, picking it up, holding it. How does this work? I mean, what do you do at that point? Do you need to then sanitize the thing, put it back, or do you need to put your product into glass cases so that nobody can touch it? I appreciate some stands are more, some of the bigger companies have huge stands and it's more back graphics and it's, yes. It's people talking. But for certainly some of the smaller businesses or some of the businesses that are making a innovative product, they like to have product out and people like to touch it. They like to feel it. And that's, what do you do there? That's really difficult, isn't it?
Well, it's an impossible situation, really, because, as you say, you would be faced with, in the current climate, you would be faced with disinfecting everything, wouldn't you? Arguably, you could disinfect your showcases, anything that's metal, anything that's plastic, anything that's maybe even cloth that could carry COVID-19 would have to be disinfected somehow. And if you see someone touch it, or if you allow someone to touch a product because you're taking them through it, you've got the social distancing issue for point one. And secondly, then you can disinfect that product. But what happens if someone picks it up and you don't see it? It's just a minefield.
But doesn't it make you think about past times when you've been at shows and I've been at exhibitions and shown Nate for instance in the US done that many years, and the cult product that Straightpoint have, there probably were 100 people a day picking that thing up and touching it.
Yeah. And
now in the position we're in now, it almost feels unclean. You think, my God, why did we do that? But would we ever do now? Would you think about that? I think I would think about that in the future. Maybe even if it was only 2 or 3 times a day, you would just maybe wipe down the product. You would sanitize your hands several times. Even in a year, 2 years' time, I think that would be, it's an awful phrase, the new norm.
Yes.
I think that's a really interesting point, because we've all come back from trade shows and just felt that horrible kind of run down feeling you get, and you wonder now how you kind of blame it on, you know, the jet lag, the sleep deprivation, maybe a little bit of overindulgence, but you wonder how much of that is just they're obviously hotbeds for spreading germs, aren't they? And you wonder how much is being passed by business cards and product and door handles and things like that, don't you?
No, absolutely. And we're not going to get around that point. So unless COVID-19 goes away, or there is some way of combating it, we're going to be faced with that. Like you say, David, for maybe another year, maybe another 2 years, maybe longer. God forbid, longer. But that could well be the case. And this expression that has come into sort of the parlance of our day, which we all hate, the new normal, that could very much represent the new normal for us.
Just a question for you guys. Would you go to a show if you had to wear a mask for the duration of it?
David?
Personally, I'm not put off by the mask, but I wouldn't go to the show full stop. I just wouldn't at the moment. No, and I don't think I would. I wouldn't. But you mentioned a show in September. I wouldn't go. No.
Yeah.
No. I mean, I've worn a mask. I was as lockdown started. I was in Spain, and we ended up on an emergency flight back. And I ended up, I wore a mask for the entire duration from when I left the hotel to when I got into my car at Gatwick. And it wasn't comfortable, but I also thought I'm not going to take any risks. You know, Spain was hit hard.
Absolutely.
I was sanitizing my hands every hour, and it was quite a scary thing to go through. I certainly wouldn't put myself into that position again.
No, and I think that's the difference, isn't it? That the kind of the necessity to travel for your safety and get home is one thing. I think just to kind of have to associate PPE and that kind of sanitization just with going about your business at a show, that for me, I would certainly have some reservations about.
And we're all family men.
Yeah.
You know, you've got to think about your extended family and your dependents, and that's obviously a big issue, not just for us, but anyone going to a trade show, whether you're manning that exhibition stand or booth, or you're traveling to the show to meet people.
Well, I think the long-term advice is still, if you can work from home, do so.
Indeed. So what do we think is the future then, or should we say at least the immediate future? I mean, are we saying then we just etch a sketch 2020 and look towards 2021, and hopefully the show program ramps up in earnest?
I would be surprised if there's much, if any, of a 2020 trade show program. We're due to travel, once the summer's done. We've got trips that are planned. I'm happy to do them personally if it makes sense and the risk level is calculated. I'm not saying I won't do them. But I'll be surprised if we get to that point. I think this is going to be a real test for marginal shows, those shows that you kind of go to every year and you think this hasn't got the footfall to really justify its being, or exhibitor numbers are dwindling, visitor numbers get lower every year. I think those shows are pretty much going to go. I don't see them coming back. I think the larger shows, will be okay, and I think they'll survive because, quite frank, they could deal with some contraction. ConExpo, was clearly, way down in terms of, footfall, but it still functioned as a show. Sure. So I think the bigger the show and the more value it has, the safer it will be. But I think that whole marketplace is going to look different, and I think the smaller exhibition is in the smaller hotel with the more niche audience. I think it's gonna struggle because I can't see people investing their time in it.
What are your thoughts, Dave?
Yeah, I think, but back to my opening remark, really, nearly all the 2020 shows, they should be chopped. And if they're not, anyone who's going to a show or saying they need to go to a show, this year they're probably not going for the right reasons. I would
Yeah.
say that they're going because they fancy a trip, or I don't see any real reason, and I don't see many companies really wanting to invest in a stand and the travel and put in there. If the advice is to work from home, the advice certainly wouldn't be to get on a plane, go to Heathrow, fly to, Singapore, Australia, or Aberdeen, and put your staff at risk. If you did a risk assessment on that, I think you wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
And for the same reasons, I wouldn't visit a show at the moment.
Sure. Sorry, Rich. I was just going to say. I mean, I've launched shows, as you both know, and run exhibitions, and some in the States that I've run. The venues themselves have effectively shut themselves down. So there might be a willingness from the organizer to go ahead. There may even be a willingness from some of the exhibitors to go ahead, as well as attendees. But the rug's been pulled from under their feet. They just can't progress in 2020. So they're now looking ahead to 2021. So I'm kind of surprised, in fact, that there's still some events out there as close as September, for example, and October even, that still appear to be in the running.
We spoke about the consensus that you need to get a show off the ground at the outset, didn't we? And you're just not going to get that level of buy-in. And there's going to be plenty of companies that have already probably issued corporate policy, that no one travels for the remainder of the year. So then it doesn't come down to choice at all. So
yeah.
So what's an exhibition going to look like post COVID?
That's almost impossible to half guess, really.
Is handshaking a thing of the past?
I think handshaking. I can see a lot of people wearing. If it's not a policy at the event, and I see lots of events move. I can feel a lot of them are going to move to, no handshaking. We all saw the badges in the COVID era in that window where shows were taking place. We saw the badges and the signposts. No offence, it just makes sense with the handshake in it and the strike through. I see lots of shows are going to do that for the foreseeable future. If the events don't do it, I'm sure plenty of people will.
Markers on the floors, taping out distances.
There's going to be exact stands, booths are going to have to be spaced. There's going to be the usual markings that we're seeing now as retail's opening back up.
Could even have things like augmented reality, where you have targets on the floor, and then your smartphone, your smart device, so it's a tablet, and then you're walking around an augmented piece of equipment, right? So I mean, this could open up, a lot of opportunities and some new technology for shows that has been buzzing around the periphery for a little while, but maybe that will work. And you may have to have like a strict diary whereby you book an appointment with a stand, someone on a stand, before you actually enter the venue, and then strict rotation, meet people, and then move out. I mean, you may find that a venue can hold 2,000, 20,000 people, but they may only allow 200 in at a time. So it's going to feel strange, but none of us really know. And I think it's going to be very different and extremely challenging for the exhibitions industry.
And what about later in the evening when when a beer's been taken and you start to forget this stuff?
Well,
it's
going to be Zoom calls from hotel rooms, right? Socially distanced drinks.
Yeah, I mean, is that what you do? I mean, do you go to an exhibition and then at the end of the day, you socially distance and you sanitize your hands around the show, and you then go back to your room and you order room service and then you sleep and then you go to the show the next day? Is that how it's going to be?
Very, very possibly. Very possibly. Well, look, I mean, thanks a lot, guys. I think you've given us and our listeners lots to think about and mull over. Hopefully we'll be meeting up before too long at one of these events, albeit elbow bumping and social pint drinking, but
and with neater hair.
With neater hair, I certainly hope so. Either that or a beard and long hair. So,
It'd be good.
so
It'd
Dave,
be good to catch up face to face.
yeah, no, absolutely. So Dave, thanks very much for joining us on Lifting Lowdown, and Rich, thanks again to you too. Actually, just before I let you guys go, I mean, something that we'll be talking about in the next edition is GLAD 2020, and Bridger Howes, as well as Lift and Hoist International, along with Leah, are major stakeholders for this new initiative, which is basically a lifting appreciation day on the 9th of July. Just some quick thoughts on that from you, David.
Well, as you know, I've been promoting it on social media, and I've had quite a number of people that have and a remarkable interest in the posts that I've done on LinkedIn, particularly on it. And people, from several continents have contacted me and want to be involved, and I've linked them up with Mark Bridger to take that forward. But I mean, what a great, as a global thing, what a great thing to do, attracting young people, introducing safety or increasing safety. I mean, it's this should be maybe it should be an annual thing, focus.
That's hopefully the intention. I mean, it's all about fixing a date in the diary, and then every year really celebrating what is, I guess, this almost invisible industry, right?
Yeah, establish a real cadence for that, every year that can happen.
Yeah. And Rich, obviously you're very much involved.
Yeah, we've all got lifting in our DNA, haven't we? So we're all preaching to the choir. But it's interesting going back to your introduction, where you kind of mentioned a little bit of my background as a sports hack, and then stumbling into this industry by accident. And I still have friends and family now kind of tease me and send me pictures when they're on holiday of a crane, or see a bit of lifting chain on a building site and send it to me, and send it. Thought of you, Rich, saw this, and LOL, that kind of thing. But that's so indicative, I think, of the way our industry is perceived. Their tone is one of ridicule and sympathy, that I am a kind of a content guy about this kind of product. And I think that's pretty much how the lifting industry is perceived. And I think that's the challenge that we've got to set out to change that. Not all lifting gear is incredibly sexy in itself, but as an industry that makes lifting easier and safer, and keeps economies and marketplaces and whole societies moving, it is incredibly important and interesting, and a great career for people. But we've got an awful lot of work to do, and we're very much at the bottom of the mountain as the way I see it. So yeah, GLAD 2020 I think is absolutely required, but it's got to be a long-term thing.
Yeah, agreed. Well, look, I'll tell you what, Rich, we'll circle back to that topic for the next podcast, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. No, I'm really looking forward to that, and giving it continued backing, and appreciate the invitation and the opportunity.
Well, it's an absolute pleasure speaking to you both, and thanks very much for joining us today.
Thanks, mate.
Bye.
Okay, cheers, lads. Bye now. There we are, the first edition of Lifting Lowdown firmly under our belts. I always enjoy speaking to Dave and Rich. They're great guys, and I'm really pleased they could join me in kicking off the first episode. Between them, they have a lot of industry knowledge and experience, and I hope you enjoyed listening to them as much as I did talking to them. Feel free to leave comments or fire over questions if you have any. Your feedback and suggestions for future editions will enable us to make this podcast even more relevant and interesting. You can keep up to date with the latest industry news by visiting LHI's website, liftandhoist.com. Thanks for listening, and look out for the next episode in a couple of weeks. Until then, stay safe.